From Sigma Woman, this is the Business for Aligned Women podcast. I'm your host, Clara McKay, your aligned business coach and advocate for all things showing up for your vision. This is a no BS space for brave-hearted women who are actually craving change. I'm dedicated to bringing women's visions into reality, equipping women with all they need to build an abundant future, and shutting down all of the ways that you keep yourself small. Here, we're all about a women-centered approach, non-negotiable value alignment, and making bank without compromising your well-being. Each week, you're already one step closer to your most aligned and abundant future. Welcome to this week's episode. Today, we have something really gentle and really supportive and also very interesting. I invited my beautiful client, BIANCA, who is a somatic and trauma-informed therapist who specializes in childhood trauma, to come back on the podcast and have a chat about end-of-year overwhelm and some tips and some methods that can support you both in your business and anything personal that might be coming up this time of year, which can be a really touchy period for a lot of people. As usual, I go in and I ask her a lot of extra questions and we kind of deep dive a little bit. So we also talk quite a lot about therapy and little things that might be coming up in your business. So I think even if you're not feeling end of year overwhelmed, there is going to be so much information and education in this episode that I think you're going to find really interesting and really supportive. If you haven't heard of Bianca before and you'd like to hear her flavor of therapy and a little bit more discussion on childhood trauma specifically, I suggest going back and listening to episode 50. Before we get into the interview, I wanted to let you know that I'm running a competition right now, my end of year podcast listener survey, so that you can win all of my self-led offers and tools. So you can win my podcast training, my self-alignment workshop, my brand magnetism 101, and every tool that is in my shop. It is thousands of dollars worth of amazing, beautiful business strategy, resources, and tools that can support you. All you need to do is go and fill out this survey. You have to fill out the entire survey. Make sure you pop in your email and your social media handle, and I will be drawing the winner on January 30. Jump to the show notes right now and start that survey to go into the running to win. I also just want to let you know that there are only a couple of yearly business planning one-to-one sessions with me left. I am only going to be offering these until the end of January. So if you were thinking about it, I know there's so many people that I've spoken to me in my DMs who are saying you're planning on booking in. I want you to know that there's only a couple of left. When you go to book, there's lots of dates and times there, but I only want to see 2 of these per week because I'm very busy with clients. So once 2 people book in, I'm blocking everything else out. Even if you go and see, oh, it looks like there's lots of spots, it's fine, I can book later. No, as soon as 2 people book in a week, I block everything else out. So if you're interested in getting that support to have that longer term planning so that you're spending less time dropping the ball and you're a little bit more consistent in your business, jump in the show notes and book that in with me ASAP. So as Bianca goes into today, she talks about how she has obviously developed her business, developed her body of work, developed her expertise in, I think, over a year since she was on the podcast last. And she's expanded her body of work a little bit as well. So we get into that. She's going to explain that to you. And I just wanted to say that it's been such a pleasure to watch her grow, to step into her business in such a serious way. When I think about where she was when she first approached me to now, it's like completely night and day. And she's just doing business in a really healthy, grounded way. And a cool thing about Bianca, which I think could be really expansive for a lot of people, is that she spent a lot of this year traveling around Asia, traveling around Europe, and she's been working on her business and seeing clients throughout that. So I know that life's not for me because I have my beautiful dog babies, But I think that a lot of you, that digital nomad life, that getting to travel a lot while you're working, still making money, having your business support your travel and getting to see the world and being exposed to lots of different cultures while you're still kind of developing your career could be really, really interesting and really, really exciting. And also getting to run events in different parts of the world and be immersed in those different cultures and help different people in different parts of the world as well. Some of you might be really, really interested in that. In this episode, she offers grounded and very compassionate advice and very doable actions to support you over this busy season. I hope that it's going to be that gentle support that you need, and know that both Bianca and myself are thinking of you and caring for you and hoping that you feel safe and strong and shelled and supported over this season. Hi, Bianca. It's lovely to have you here. Could you please reintroduce yourself and your work to the audience?
Absolutely. Yes, first of all, thank you, Clara. I'm really excited to be here again today and really appreciate you having me back on the podcast. Hello to everyone listening. I'm Bianca. I'm a trauma informed counselor and somatic therapist. I support adult survivors of childhood trauma or people who live with complex PTSD with my online private practice, Embodied Self Therapy. I work with the body, so helping people reorient and regulate their nervous system so that they can feel safe in their bodies. And embodied self therapy now and then collaborates with others who are value aligned. And we've facilitated wellness events in Sydney, Berlin, and Amsterdam. And these days, I would also consider myself to be an activist with a lot of the work I do with clients. Yes, being about processing their unresolved trauma and healing those early wounds, but also supporting them with deconditioning and dismantling oppressive systems that many of us have internalized that often contribute to our suffering today. Things like patriarchy, capitalism, and colonialism. My work is very much about looking at context.
Amazing. I love that. I love that new, deeper, broader integration that you're bringing to it.
Absolutely. Yes. We can't look at ourselves in isolation. All of these external things do play a part in our own experience.
I don't want to go too much into it. It should probably be its own episode, but the internalized patriarchy stuff in my
Mm,
clients are daily pushing against it with them. Yeah.
yeah, it really is. No, I do understand that for sure.
It's a big thing. I don't know of how you experience it with your clients, but I think that biggest thing I've noticed is not attaching personal narratives to systemic problems. Like not saying that it's a problem that you have with yourself, it's a personality trait fault. It's actually, no, this is the soup that we're swimming in, you know?
Absolutely. Yes. A lot of my work in session with clients is really unpicking what is theirs and what isn't, what actually is coming from these systems that we operate in, for sure.
So important. I wanted to get you on again today because I thought it could be really nice to equip the audience with some tools for end of year overwhelm. Because I think whether or not we feel like it's a stressful period, it's just a busy period. It can be busy in business, but also personal. And I'd love to know what first came to your mind when I approached you and got you to think about this.
Yes. When I think about end of year overwhelm, the first thing that comes to mind is how much pressure we place on ourselves. And again, a lot of the time it's not ours to carry. And this ties in with what we were just speaking about. With patriarchy, there's a lot of invisible labor and a lot of foregoing our own needs as women to prioritize those of others, and capitalism and colonialism. There's a lot of this pressure to produce. Because of all of these layers, this time of year can really feel like a final sprint to the finish line with deadlines and planning, but also social engagements all converging. And there's also this societal expectation to be simultaneously celebrating and thriving. So that can really also compound that internal pressure. It's no wonder many of us feel exhausted and stretched. Instead of naturally winding down, we often ramp up, which isn't sustainable for our systems. And of course, we've all been there, but with the right supports and resources in place, it doesn't have to be the stressful time of year that it often is.
Yeah, it's so interesting that feeling like we need to hit goals by the end of the year or achieve things by the end of the year. That last push at the point when we're probably the least resourced is quite silly.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's important to remember that the world isn't going to end on December 31st. There is going to be time moving forward for us. Having that reminder can help to release some of that internalized pressure.
Yeah, totally.
I think that's important to really honor our own natural paces as well.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, pacing has been coming up a lot recently. So, thinking about that, do you have any specific tips or practices for dealing with the stress, particularly in seeing family over the holidays from a trauma informed perspective?
Absolutely. Since I work mainly with people with childhood trauma histories, this is something that I do support my one-to-one clients and my wider community with. I have a end of year freebie, which is my silly season survival guide. It's a free downloadable PDF and a supportive resource for navigating family dynamics and looking after your inner child during the holiday season. But I'll give a few tips now. And what I'll say in general, from a trauma informed perspective, it's really important to focus on your own personal sense of safety, control, and agency in these situations. But a few tips that I can share is, first of all, setting boundaries. And that can be with yourself, it can be with family members. For example, maybe how much time you're going to be spending at certain events, or maybe if there are any topics of discussion that are off limits. So maybe consider what that could look like for you. The second thing would be to resource yourself. We talked about just then, you mentioned the end of the year being a time of year where we're under resourced. This can be really important to just ramp up towards the end of the year. And when I talk about resources, I'm talking about self regulation practices, people, places, things that you can access to support yourself. They can be proactive self care measures. If you know that you've got a family engagement coming up, you can ramp up the self care to prepare yourself, but also as a reactive measure to after the fact to help you manage the stress or whatever else is coming up for you. And finally, I would say practicing self compassion and acceptance. And sometimes this can be one of the hardest things to do, but acknowledging that interacting with family can trigger old wounds, especially if you come from dysfunctional families. Sometimes it's just inevitable. Practicing that self compassion and acceptance for what is can be helpful. If things don't play out as you envisioned, know that that's okay. What did happen that you could potentially learn from, or maybe there were some small wins that you can still celebrate. Those are some things that can be helpful to keep front of mind. I expand on all of this in my Silly Season Survival Guide, which is available to download on Embodied Self Therapy's website.
Sounds like a very important guide. I'd love to break down a couple of those things and go a bit deeper. One thing that comes to mind for me is in this period, if you're scheduling, probably giving yourself a bit more of a buffer, like in case you do have an experience and you do need that extra time to self regulate or self resource, not feeling like, oh, I don't have time to do it. I've got all this extra stuff. Having a look at your schedule and building in some buffer time to support that. But can you chat just for a second about the difference between regulating and replenishment? Because I feel a lot of people are doing a lot of stuff and a lot of practices as a way to regulate their nervous system. But sometimes those things aren't necessarily really replenishing them like on an exhaustion level. Do you have any
Mm,
thoughts on it?
yeah, that's an interesting question. When I think about the word replenishing, what comes to mind is nourishment, and almost to a point where you're replenishing energy that has been depleted. So, yeah, for me personally, nourishment is one of my core values. And when I think about what that entails, they are things that bring me joy and light me up and are more on that lighter side. And sometimes they're obviously not business related as well. But when I think about regulation, what that is more of is balancing.
Yeah, like just coming back to homeostasis kind of thing.
Yes,
I think what you're saying is we need to do both.
exactly.
need to
Yes.
have the nourishment, and we also need to be making sure that we're not having this extreme up and downs in how we're feeling in our body.
Absolutely. Also, it's important to realize that a healthy nervous system is one that is dynamic. So, one that does move between the ups and the downs, so that we can fill up our cup with these replenishing, nourishing practices. The better, like that we can bring ourselves up to a baseline where we actually are functioning at our best rather than trying to regulate from more of this.
We've talked about tips for people who are seeing family. Do you have any wise words for people who are choosing not to see family in this season?
Absolutely. Yes. In this time, it is important to spend the time in whatever way feels meaningful to you. And if that means spending time away from family, spending time with yourself, or spending time with other chosen loved ones, whatever it may be, as long as it comes down to being meaningful and supportive for you, that's great. That's perfect. Celebrate that. I think it can also be really helpful to create your own rituals and traditions around this time. Just make them extensions of you, because ultimately it's coming down to reparenting yourself. Just as long as you're doing something that honors that, then that's perfect.
Yeah, and I love that making new traditions or even having little small rituals. And I think that could be helpful for people who are seeing family as well to just, if it's a tricky family situation, having your own little rituals or things that you can do so that you can like mark, if you like Christmas or New Year, whatever it is, mark that time without there being maybe input that is less safe. Having your own little ways to do that and celebrate on your own or with other people can be really lovely.
Absolutely. Yes.
Beautiful. Do you have any specific tips or practices more so for dealing with end of year overwhelm for business owners?
Yeah, look, being in business for just under 2 years, I haven't been in the game for very long, but I'm happy to share what has worked for me in the past and what I'm currently doing to support myself as the year comes to a close. The first being prioritizing. And personally, there are just so many tasks that I want to action. And also, as a creative person, there are so many ideas that are constantly coming through to me all the time that just gets added to the never ending to do list. So just realizing that now is not the time to be taking on any extra projects or getting distracted. Instead, what can you do to get clear on those essential tasks that need to be completed before the end of the year and just focusing on that? And if you have a plan in place, follow that. If you don't, maybe consider making one. And anything that isn't urgent can wait. What I said before, the world isn't going to end once we click over into 20s. There is going to be time for the rest of it in the new year. The second thing that I could say is remembering what your personal and business values are. We've already touched on this, and I know that you're very big on this, Clara, but this can be really helpful in that decision making and that prioritization, and can also be really helpful to zoom out when we're caught up in the overwhelm and nitty gritty. For me, spaciousness is one of my core values as well, which means that my business is structured in a way that allows for that spaciousness, which is intended to give me a lot of downtime for self care and nourishment so that I can show up best in my business for my clients and ultimately to avoid that overwhelm and burnout. But the thing is, I need to be accountable to also make sure that my actions are sticking to those personal values. And finally, I thought I would share something that is a non negotiable for me. It's movement and some form of movement every day. And right now, I'm really big on dancing. And dance is now permanently embedded into my routine. I dance as I'm getting ready for the day, before and after every client session. I danced before coming on to record this with you today. For me, it's a way to maintain that connection with my body, to move any anxious or stuck energy, and also as a way to bring in lightness and joy, which can counteract that stress. Maybe for anyone listening, it could also be worthwhile identifying some non negotiables that are going to support you and your well being during this time.
Such wonderful tips. And you're totally right that there's always going to be, there will always be a million things that you could do in your business, a million ways to grow your business, a million new ideas that you have. But that tempering and prioritizing is what, real proper business owners and entrepreneurs do. They go, what's the top level things or maybe not the most urgent, but the most important, the things that are going to give you the most value back is so important. And I literally did this yesterday. I had a look at my end of year and I was like, there's just too many things for 8 weeks, and just stretching out those goals and looking at the next year and plotting them in a really really spacious, gentle way. And something that I do with all of my clients is we do a 12-month plan. I get them to do one draft, they send it to me, and generally all the time I will be like, remove 20 or 30% of that stuff and space it back out, because we all tend to overload ourselves and forget our needs in the moment when we're planning. And I wanted to just reflect on those other 2 points. With the embodying the values and recentering the values, we're almost at the end of the year. And I know that that can feel really overwhelming, but it's so important in your business to be planning ahead, thinking long term, especially if you're someone who struggled with consistency up until now. If you feel like you drop the ball a lot, you struggle to be consistent, you struggle to show up ongoing in your business, you need longer term planning. Let me help you. Let's sit down together and map out your entire 2025 so that you can start next year ahead of the game, not feeling like you're catching up, not feeling like you're on the back foot. I have an incredibly limited number of planning sessions left for this year. You can jump in the show notes, book in a one-to-one planning call with me, and you will get a 12-month plan specific to your business with all of your launches and everything that you're focusing on mapped out so that you can create a spacious, gentle, nourishing, and free way of being in your business next year. A reminder that I want to give to everyone is your values aren't just about the actions and behaviors that you have in the world. The values are also about the way you choose to perceive things and approach things. So, for instance, with your value of spaciousness, you can intentionally have a spacious calendar, you can have a spacious day, but going into a day unconsciously and rushing and moving through those tasks versus going into a day with the approach of spaciousness, like the mental lens of spaciousness, is when the embodiment really starts to happen on a deeper level. I just wanted to remind everyone of that. I don't know if that brings anything up for you, if you want to share anything about that.
No, the only thing I can add is I absolutely agree. It's not just about the decisions and the actions, but it's about intention too. It for me is really about how I want to feel and how I want to show up. And of course, it's a lens that I look at or try to look at everything through. So I agree.
Yeah, and when we do that, and not to sound too woo-woo, but I think that's when the real magnetism and the magic really starts to happen. And I know you were just talking about anyone's non-negotiables, but I do want to reiterate that importance of the link between movement and stress. And I think because my audience are very cerebral, they're really in their head, they do a lot of thinking, they think a lot and they conceptualize a lot. There can sometimes be that disconnection with the body that I know that you're all about. And it's literally scientific that if you're not moving in some way, you're just perpetuating that low lying stress. The movement is something that a lot of women business owners, it's like one of the first things to go when they're feeling overwhelmed. If anyone wants to learn any more about that, there's a great book called Burnout, Closing the Stress Cycle, that talks about that. I was wondering, is there any little indicators or signs that we could watch out for in ourselves that might be indicators that we're not supporting our needs enough or that we're moving towards burnout? Is there anything that people should watch out for?
Absolutely. Yes. You mentioned that I work a lot with the body, and a lot of the work that I do is with clients and regulating and reorienting their nervous systems. And one thing that I teach them from the very beginning is getting to recognize the differences between the nervous system states. When we're stressed, we're in that sympathetic state, which is associated with this buildup of energy. Our body mobilizes us to move, right? So you might feel like a jitteriness, you might feel anxiety. Also, anger is associated here, but some of those somatic symptoms or sensations that we can feel again is that jitteriness, increased heart rate, sweating, things like that. That's what that can typically feel like. And when we're starting to move into burnout, that can sometimes push us over the edge into this freeze state, which can be associated with feelings of numbness, dissociation, lethargy. What's the other end of the spectrum? And our body just moves into that state as a last resort coping mechanism in order to conserve our energy because it has been under such prolonged stress. So this can really feel like, yeah, like everything is an effort. You might feel really heavy in your body. You might lose interest in things. You might even be having these out of body experiences where you're not feeling a connection with your body. That's what that can feel like. So I hope that gives a little bit more insight.
Yeah. So looking out for those two experiences, is there any ways that we can discern between that fawn freeze or freeze and procrastination?
Ooh.
Because I think there's a lot of people who are in for freeze and they call it procrastination, but there's a lot of people who are actually just procrastinating but calling it freeze. I'm like, how do we know which one is which?
Yeah, I guess it's important to know that freeze states or like a fawn state is a nervous system state, whereas procrastination is a coping mechanism. It's a resource that we use in order to deal with being in that state. So that's the difference between the two. One is something that you would do to actually try to self-soothe or distract you from what's actually going on internally. Whereas, yeah, that fawn is a state of being.
Yeah.
Um,
So do you think that would mean that the fawn freeze state it would be every aspect of your life? But if it's procrastinating, you might be fine to do other things, but you're procrastinating on these specific topics?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. You can employ a procrastination no matter where you are sitting on that nervous system scales.
Yeah, okay. That's probably a good indicator for people if it's like they have heaps of motivation to action and do things that they like, but they're not doing the thing that they don't necessarily want to do, then that might be more procrastination. But if you're struggling with moving forward in anything, that might be more of the freeze state.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Great.
Right. I think that's going to be really, really helpful for a lot of people listening. The last couple of questions. We've had the pleasure of working together on and off for the last couple of years. And we recently jumped in for another 3-month container, which from my perspective, I see if you do the intensive and then you do some ongoing, like a level 1, level 2, level 3, like we just keep going deeper into the things that you really need to grow the business. Could you reflect on that process?
Yeah. Firstly, I've loved having the ongoing support because, yeah, you've been there from the very start and have seen me now through different phases and seasons. So I think that our recent container happened at such a perfect time. My business had grown, but I'd also gone through some personal changes at that time. I had still been operating in the same way from right at the very beginning. So meaning that I was spending a lot of the same time and the same energy working on the back end stuff whilst also trying to adapt to changes and having the business grow and my caseload increase at the same time. So that was actually quite frustrating trying to hold all of that because I did feel like I could never really get ahead. So checking in with you was really about recentering and optimizing and fine tuning and automating where possible so that I could actually feel more spaciousness so that I could continue doing good work, but also feel like the needle was moving, was embodied. It came at a perfect timing.
And can you chat just for a second? Because I know it's such a tricky thing about having someone else who has your best interests at heart, but coming into your business and shaking up where you'd become not complacent, but just rote in what you were doing, like having another opinion or another view coming into it. Can you just chat about that for a sec?
Oh, it's so helpful because as our one woman show, I'm so close to everything. So sometimes I need that outsider perspective to help me zoom out and help me just redirect to what is important. And also because I'm working on my business, but I'm also on the tools. And so for me, I feel more comfortable being in that therapist role rather than the business owner role. And that's something that I'm still really getting confident in and expanding into. So yeah, like having you, Clara, as that support to help guide me in those places where it's not really my expertise. So much more easeful because I can concentrate on what I'm good at and then I can lean on you for other things. It doesn't have to be me doing absolutely everything and being everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, you're not meant to be an expert in that. You're meant to be an expert in therapy, you know? And I just think there's a lot of stuckness around trying to do it all on your own and wasting time researching things that you could just ask an expert one question and learn it in 2 seconds. And because of that closeness and feeling like you have to do it all on your own.
Yeah, that saves so much time and energy that it could be better spent elsewhere, actually working in my business.
You're working your business or that going back to that nourishment and replenishment piece or spending an hour dancing, going on YouTube trying to work out all this stuff that isn't the easiest thing for you. So I know that you've got the end of your survival skill kit guide. Are there any other places for people to get started with you or to move into seeking support with you right now?
Sure. Yeah. If you are interested in individualized therapy in 2025, you can go ahead and book in your initial session with me through Embodied Self Therapy's website. I also offer free 15-minute chemistry calls where we can talk about what therapy can look like for you. Otherwise, I also have other resources available on my website, and I also have my own podcast, Healing CPTSD. So you can look me up, have a listen, maybe get some more insights into the world of complex trauma, and also get a better feel for who I am and how I like to work.
Wonderful. And we'll link all of that in the show notes. And not to be like talking about this time thing and putting time on things, but something I've been thinking about a lot lately is if you are someone who cares about the end of the year and the start of the year and yearly goals and all of that stuff, I think this for both of our services, both business coaching and therapy, there can be something really powerful in booking things in this year to start either this year or right away at the start of January. Because I think sometimes we can wait until we need it. And then we are in March or April or whatever, and we really feel like we're on the back foot. And then we spend the rest of the year trying to catch up. So I think booking it in sooner rather than later and supporting yourself for next year would be like such a beneficial move for people.
Absolutely. And we all know how fast time can go. So, yeah, by the time we know it and we've caught our breath after the end of the year, we're already into the early stages of 2025. The more that you can put in place now to support yourself, the better.
Amazing. Perfect. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom today, Bianca.
Thank you, Clara. Thanks, everyone.
If you can't tell, getting to share this time with you is something that I find truly sacred. I know that you're busy, but if you've taken anything away from our time spent together today, could you extend the love and share this episode with a friend, your community, or on your socials? Tag me so that I can see it and I can share it too. Or when you have a spare moment, leave the podcast a review. These things cost you nothing and will mean so much to me. Let's get this resource into the hands of more women visionaries and help us collectively move towards our most aligned way of being and doing business together.